The gunshot echoed across the plains of Laramie, Wyoming, as Delilah Evans scrambled for cover behind an overturned wagon, her breath coming in ragged gasps. It was 1877, and the life she had carefully rebuilt over the past 3 years was crumbling around her once again. Blood seeped through her fingers where she clutched her arm, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the crushing realization that her past had finally caught up with her. Delilah. The harsh voice of Benjamin Colt, her former husband's business partner and the man who had been hunting her since she fled St. Louis, rang out across the chaos. "You can't run forever, you murdering witch." Tears stung her eyes as she pressed herself against the splintered wood. She wasn't a murderer, she'd acted in self-defense when James had come at her with that knife, but no one had believed her. No one except her sister, who had helped her escape west under a new name after the trial collapsed in scandal. For 3 years, she'd managed to build a quiet life working at Madame Foster's dress shop in Laramie. But now Benjamin had found her, and he was making good on his promise to finish what the courts couldn't. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart race faster. More of Benjamin's men, no doubt. She was trapped. "Get on now," came a deep, unfamiliar voice. Delilah peeked around the wagon to see a tall man on horseback, his face partially obscured by the wide brim of his Stetson. He extended a gloved hand toward her. "Unless you're fancying the company of those men, madam, I suggest you take my hand right quick." She hesitated only a moment before making her decision. Anything was better than falling into Benjamin's clutches. Gripping his forearm, she allowed herself to be pulled up behind him on the horse. "Hold tight," he instructed, and then they were off, galloping away from town as Benjamin's furious shouts faded behind them. They rode hard for what felt like hours, the stranger pushing his horse to its limits until they reached a small homestead nestled against rolling hills. Only when they dismounted did Delilah get a proper look at her rescuer. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His jawline was strong beneath several days' growth of beard, and when he removed his hat, she saw hair the color of wheat, slightly too long and curling at the ends. "Name's Asher Harrington," he said, extending his hand. "Folks call me Ash." "Delilah Evans," she replied, then winced as the movement aggravated her wound. Concern flashed in his eyes. "You're hurt. Come inside." His cabin was modest but clean, with a sturdy table, a few chairs, a cast-iron stove, and a narrow bed in the corner. He gestured for her to sit while he fetched water and clean cloth. "That was quite a commotion back in town," he commented as he gently cleaned her wound. "It was just a graze, thankfully." "Mind telling me why those men were so intent on shooting you?" Delilah stiffened. "I'd rather not say." Asher's expression remained neutral as he bandaged her arm. "Fair enough. We all have things we'd rather keep buried." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. There was understanding in his eyes and perhaps a hint of his own pain. "Why did you help me?" she asked. He shrugged. "Didn't much care for the odds. 5 men against 1 woman seemed hardly sporting." A wry smile tugged at his lips. "Besides, I've never been fond of Benjamin Colt. Man's got a mean streak wider than the Mississippi." Delilah's eyes widened. "You know him, know of him." "His reputation precedes him." Asher tied off the bandage. "You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow I'll help you figure out your next move." "I can't impose, it's not an imposition. I've got the space and those men will be searching every boarding house and hotel in Laramie. You'll be safer here." Delilah wanted to argue, but exhaustion washed over her. She nodded gratefully. "Thank you." As night fell, Asher insisted she take the bed while he made a pallet by the fire. Lying in the darkness, listening to his steady breathing across the room, Delilah wondered what twist of fate had brought her to this stranger's cabin. And more importantly, could she trust him with her secrets when everyone else had judged her so harshly? Morning came with the smell of coffee and bacon. Delilah opened her eyes to find Asher already up and cooking at the stove. She sat up, suddenly conscious of her rumpled appearance. "There's water for washing up," he said without turning around, "and I set out some of my sister's old clothes. They might be a bit large, but they're clean." The simple kindness nearly undid her. "Thank you," she managed. After washing and changing, she joined him at the table. "Your sister lives nearby?" she asked, accepting the plate he offered. "No." His expression clouded. "Rebecca died 5 years ago. Cholera took her, her husband, and their little boy." "I'm sorry," Delilah said softly. Asher nodded, his eyes distant. "I kept some of her things, couldn't bring myself to get rid of them." He cleared his throat. "What about you? Any family? A sister in Denver?" Delilah pushed eggs around her plate. "We don't correspond much, safer that way." "Because of men like Colt?" She met his gaze steadily. "Yes." He didn't press further, and they finished their meal in comfortable silence. Afterward, as Delilah helped with the dishes, Asher spoke again. "I need to ride into town, get a sense of how things stand." Fear gripped her. "They'll be looking for you now, too." "They don't know me from Adam," he assured her. "I'll be careful. Lock the door behind me and don't open it for anyone but me." After he left, Delilah explored the cabin more thoroughly. It was a bachelor's home, functional rather than comfortable, but there were touches that spoke of Asher's character. Well-worn books stacked beside the bed, a carved wooden horse on the mantel, a carefully mended quilt. On the small desk in the corner, she noticed a stack of papers, what looked like official documents. Curiosity got the better of her, and she glanced at the top sheet. It was a deed to a silver mine, dated 3 years prior. Beside it lay a faded newspaper clipping about a mine collapse that had killed 17 men. She quickly stepped away, feeling like an intruder. Whatever story those papers told, it wasn't hers to discover. Hours later, the sound of approaching hoofbeats sent her heart racing again. She peered through the window, relief flooding through her when she recognized Asher's form. She unlocked the door before he reached it. His expression was grim as he entered, removing his hat and coat. "Colt's got men watching the roads out of town and has put up a reward for information on your whereabouts." Delilah sank into a chair, despair washing over her. "I've put you in danger. I should leave." "And go where?" Asher challenged. "They'd catch you before you got 10 miles. "I can't stay here indefinitely." Asher ran a hand through his hair. "No, but I have a plan. My friend Thomas owns a ranch about 50 miles north. It's remote, and he owes me a favor. You could stay there until things cool down." "Why would you do this for me?" Delilah asked, searching his face. "You don't even know me." Something flickered in his eyes. "Let's just say I understand what it's like to be hunted for something that wasn't entirely your fault." His words hung in the air between them, an invitation to share their burdens. Delilah took a deep breath. "My husband was James Blackwell, a businessman from St. Louis," she began. "When I married him at 19, he seemed charming, successful, but in private he was different." Her hands trembled and she clasped them tightly together. "The first time he hit me was 6 months after our wedding. He apologized, swore it would never happen again. But it did. Again and again." Asher's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. 3 years ago, I finally worked up the courage to leave. I packed a bag while he was at work, but he came home early, caught me. He was furious." Her voice faltered. "He had a knife. He said if he couldn't have me, no one would. We struggled, and somehow the knife ended up in his chest." She looked up, expecting to see judgment in Asher's eyes, but found only somber understanding. "Self-defense," he said quietly. That's what I told the police, but James's family was influential. His business partner, Benjamin, testified that I had threatened to kill James before, that I had a lover. She laughed bitterly. As if I could have. James hardly let me out of his sight. The charges were dismissed due to lack of evidence, but everyone believed I was guilty. My sister helped me flee west. I've been running ever since, changing my name, moving whenever I feared I'd been recognized. She met his gaze directly. So now you know, I'm damaged goods, Mr. Harrington. Asher leaned forward, his eyes intense. We're all damaged in some way, Miss Evans. Some of us just hide it better than others. Something in his voice made her ask, "And how are you damaged, Mr. Harrington?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke. I owned the Silver Creek mine. 3 years ago, there was a collapse. 17 men died because I ignored warnings about unsafe conditions. I was trying to meet a deadline, make a profit. His voice was hollow with self-recrimination. Afterward, the families wanted justice. The law cleared me, said it was an accident, but I knew better. So you left. I sold everything I had, gave most of the money to the families, and came out here to start over. He met her eyes. We've both got blood on our hands, Miss Evans. Difference is, yours was spilled in defense of your life. Mine was spilled for greed. They sat in silence, two broken souls who had just laid their darkest secrets bare. We should leave at dawn, Asher finally said. The journey to Thomas's ranch will take 2 days. Delilah nodded. Whatever came next, she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in years, that thought brought her comfort rather than fear. They set out before sunrise, Asher on his stallion and Delilah on a gentle mare he kept for occasional visitors. The early morning air was crisp, the sky gradually lightening from deep indigo to pale lavender. They rode in companionable silence, both lost in their thoughts. By midday, they had left the main trails behind, following paths only Asher seemed to know. They stopped to rest the horses by a small creek, where Asher produced a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried apples. "How much farther to your friend's ranch?" Delilah asked, stretching her legs. "We'll make camp tonight and reach Thomas's place by tomorrow afternoon," Asher replied. "How's your arm feeling?" She rotated it carefully. "Better. Your doctoring skills are commendable." A faint smile touched his lips. "Rebecca taught me. She was a healer of sorts. You were close." She was 10 years older than me, more like a mother than a sister after our parents died. Nostalgia softened his features. "She's the one who convinced me to invest in that mine, thought it would make my fortune." "You can't blame her for what happened," Delilah said gently. "I don't. The choices were mine." He looked at her thoughtfully. "What about your sister?" "You said she helped you escape. Clara is 2 years younger. She never liked James, said he had cold eyes." Delilah's lips curved in a sad smile. "I should have listened to her." She was at the courthouse every day during the preliminary hearings, and when the case was dismissed, she already had train tickets and a new identity prepared for me. Smart woman. Yes. She married well, a kind man who supports her charitable work with women in difficult situations. Delilah sighed. "I miss her, but letters can be traced." "Perhaps someday you won't have to hide anymore," Asher said. She gave him a skeptical look. "Men like Benjamin Colt don't forget or forgive." "Neither do I," Asher replied. A steel edge to his voice that reminded Delilah this man, for all his gentleness with her, was not someone to be underestimated. They continued riding until dusk, making camp in a sheltered hollow beneath towering pines. Asher built a small fire while Delilah laid out their bedrolls. "I'll take first watch," he said as they finished a supper of beans and jerky. "Get some rest." Delilah hesitated. "Do you really think they could have tracked us this far?" "Probably not, but caution has kept me alive this long." He settled against a tree trunk, rifle across his lap. "Sleep. I'll wake you in a few hours." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Delilah. She watched Asher through half-closed eyes, studying his profile in the firelight. There was a stillness to him, a contained strength that spoke of a man who had faced his demons and made an uneasy peace with them. She wondered if such peace would ever be possible for her. When he finally woke her for her watch, their hands brushed briefly as he passed her the rifle. Even that fleeting contact sent an unexpected warmth through her veins. She pushed the feeling aside. This was no time for such foolishness. The night passed without incident, and they broke camp at first light. The terrain grew more rugged as they traveled north, with rolling hills giving way to rocky outcroppings and deeper ravines. "Thomas's place is just beyond that ridge," Asher said in the early afternoon, pointing ahead. "He calls it Redemption Ranch." A wry smile touched his lips. "Man's got a flair for the dramatic. Is he a friend from your mining days?" Asher shook his head. "We were in the war together, Confederate cavalry. He saved my life at Shiloh." Delilah studied him with new interest. "You don't strike me as the soldier type." "I was 18, full of piss and vinegar, thought I was immortal." His expression darkened. "Shiloh cured me of that notion right quick." Before she could respond, a shot rang out, kicking up dirt just ahead of Asher's horse. The stallion reared, and Asher cursed, fighting to control the animal while simultaneously drawing his revolver. "Get down," he shouted to Delilah, but her mare, spooked by the gunshot, had already bolted, carrying her away from Asher and toward a stand of trees where the shooter must be hiding. Delilah clung desperately to the saddle as the horse charged forward. Through the trees, she glimpsed a man with a rifle taking aim at her. Terror seized her heart as she realized she was galloping straight toward him. Another shot cracked through the air, and the rifleman jerked backward, dropping his weapon. Asher thundered past her, racing toward the fallen man. By the time Delilah managed to regain control of her mount and follow, Asher was kneeling beside the shooter, checking for signs of life. "Dead," he reported grimly as she approached. "One of Colt's men. I recognize him from town." Delilah felt the blood drain from her face. "How did they find us? Must have picked up our trail." Asher's expression was grim as he searched the man's pockets, finding only ammunition and a folded paper. He opened it to reveal a crude map with their approximate route marked. "Someone in Laramie talked." Fear clawed at Delilah's throat. "If one found us." "Others aren't far behind," Asher finished. "We need to reach Thomas's place. Now." They remounted and rode hard, pushing their tired horses up the ridge. As they crested it, Delilah saw a sprawling ranch below a large cabin, several outbuildings, corrals, and grazing land stretching as far as she could see. They were halfway down the slope when 3 riders emerged from the tree line behind them, giving chase. Almost there. Asher called, urging his horse faster. Gunshots peppered the ground around them as they galloped toward the ranch. Ahead, Delilah saw a man emerge from the cabin, rifle in hand. He took aim past them and shots rang out in quick succession. One of their pursuers fell from his saddle while the others veered away, retreating into the trees. Moments later, they clattered into the ranch yard, their horses lathered and heaving. The man with the rifle approached tall and lean, with iron-gray hair and a face weathered by sun and hardship. "Cutting it mighty close, Ash," he drawled, eyes scanning the ridge where their pursuers had disappeared. "Always did know how to make an entrance, Thomas," Asher replied, dismounting and moving to help Delilah down. Her legs trembled so badly she nearly collapsed against him. His arm came around her waist, steadying her. Thomas's sharp eyes missed nothing. "This the trouble you mentioned in your message? This is Miss Delilah Evans," Asher corrected with a pointed look. Miss Evans, meet Thomas Reed, the most ornery son of a gun ever to survive Shiloh. Thomas's weathered face creased in a smile as he tipped his hat. Madam, any friend of Ash's is welcome at Redemption Ranch, even if they do bring a passel of trouble with them. I'm sorry, Delilah began, but Thomas waved her apology away. Been too quiet around here anyway. Come inside while my boys see to your horses and keep an eye out for your friends. He nodded toward two ranch hands who had appeared from one of the outbuildings, rifles ready. The interior of the main house was surprisingly comfortable, with polished wooden floors, substantial furniture, and colorful woven rugs. A woman with copper-streaked dark hair and kind eyes emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "This is my wife, Sarah," Thomas said with unmistakable pride. "Sarah, this is Ash's friend, Miss Evans." "Welcome," Sarah said warmly. "You look exhausted, poor dear. Let me show you where you can freshen up." Delilah glanced at Asher, who nodded encouragingly. "Go on." "Thomas and I need to discuss our situation." Sarah led Delilah to a cozy bedroom with a copper wash basin already filled with steaming water. "Take your time," the older woman said. "Dinner won't be ready for an hour yet. There's a dress in the wardrobe that should fit you belonged to our daughter before she married and moved to Denver." Left alone, Delilah sank onto the bed, the events of the past 2 days crashing over her in waves. She'd gone from a life carefully constructed to avoid notice to being hunted across the Wyoming territory, rescued by a stranger who carried his own dark past, and now sought refuge with people she'd just met. Yet somehow, she felt safer than she had in years. After washing away the dust of travel and changing into the borrowed dress, a simple blue calico that fit reasonably well, Delilah found her way back to the main room. Thomas and Asher sat at a large oak table, deep in conversation that ceased when she entered. Asher rose immediately, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. "You look refreshed," he said, the slight hesitation suggesting he might have been about to say something else. "Thank you," she turned to Thomas. "I can't express my gratitude for your hospitality, Mr. Reed, especially given the circumstances." Thomas gestured for her to join them. "Ash explained your situation. Benjamin Colt's reputation precedes him, even in these parts. We were discussing how best to proceed," Asher added. "Those men will be back, likely with reinforcements." "I've sent word to the sheriff in Clearwater," Thomas said. "He's a good man, not easily bought, but it'll take time for the law to intervene, and Colt's men don't strike me as the patient type." Delilah's hands twisted in her lap. "I've brought danger to your home. I should leave." "Nonsense," Sarah said firmly, entering with a tray of coffee. "This ranch has weathered worse than a few hired guns." She set the tray down and took a seat beside her husband, her presence clearly expected and welcomed in their council. "Sarah's right," Thomas agreed. "Redemption Ranch has always been a haven for those in need of a second chance. We're well armed and have loyal hands. We'll stand our ground." Delilah looked between the three of them, these virtual strangers offering protection when her own family had turned their backs after James's death. Emotion threatened to overwhelm her. "Why would you risk so much for someone you don't even know?" Thomas exchanged a glance with his wife. "Ash told us what happened with your husband. No one should be punished for defending themselves. And we know what it means to need a fresh start," Sarah added softly. "Thomas came home from the war a different man, angry, broken. It took years and a lot of love to find peace." Thomas covered his wife's hand with his own. "What Sarah's trying to say in her gentle way is that we understand damage. We've lived it. They said I was too damaged to ever have a normal life again," Delilah whispered, voicing for the first time the words that had haunted her since James's death. His family, the prosecutor, even some of my own relatives, they looked at me like I was something tainted. Asher's eyes met hers across the table, blue and steady as the Wyoming sky. "Then we'll be broken together," he said simply. "And that's okay. Always." The words hung in the air between them, a promise neither had expected to make or receive. Delilah felt something shift inside her, a door long barred, creaking open to admit the possibility that her life wasn't over. That damage didn't mean destruction. Sarah cleared her throat, breaking the charged moment. "Dinner should be ready soon. Ash, why don't you help Thomas check on the men while Miss Evans helps me in the kitchen?" In the kitchen, as they worked side by side preparing a hearty stew, Sarah spoke quietly. "How long have you known Asher?" "2 days," Delilah admitted. "Though it feels longer." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I've known that boy for 8 years. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Heat rose to Delilah's cheeks. "We're both running from our pasts. That creates a certain understanding." "Understanding is a fine foundation," Sarah replied, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "Better than many marriages start with." Delilah changed the subject, asking about Sarah's daughter in Denver, and the older woman allowed it, though her eyes remained shrewd. Dinner was a surprisingly convivial affair, with Thomas regaling them with tales of his and Asher's wartime exploits carefully edited, Delilah suspected, to emphasize camaraderie over carnage. Afterward, Sarah showed Delilah to her room while the men made a final check of the property's defenses. Later, unable to sleep, Delilah sat by her window gazing out at the moonlit landscape. A soft knock at her door startled her. "Yes," she called softly, "it's Asher. May I speak with you a moment?" Heart fluttering inexplicably, she opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, looking hesitant, an expression she hadn't seen on his face before. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable," he said, "and to apologize if I spoke out of turn earlier." "You didn't," she assured him quickly. "Your words, they meant a great deal to me." He nodded, visibly relieved. "Good, that's good." He seemed about to leave, then paused. "Thomas has agreed to let you stay as long as needed. His ranch hands are loyal and the property is defensible." "You'll be safe here, and you?" she asked, suddenly afraid of his answer. "Will you stay too?" Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or hope. "Do you want me to?" The question was direct, leaving no room for prevarication. Delilah found she didn't want to equivocate anyway. "Yes," she said simply, "I do." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features. "Then I'll stay. Good night, Miss Evans." "Delilah," she corrected. "I think after everything you should call me Delilah." His smile deepened. "Good night, Delilah. Good night, Asher." She closed the door, her heart lighter than it had been in years, despite the danger that still lurked beyond the ranch's boundaries. The next few days established a rhythm of surprising normality. Delilah helped Sarah with household tasks and got to know the ranch's small community. Thomas and Sarah's 5 ranch hands, plus a cook named May Lynn, who had come west from San Francisco, and a young stable boy called Rusty. Each had a story, Delilah discovered, of how Thomas had offered them work and respect when others wouldn't. Asher divided his time between keeping watch with the ranch hands and working on repairs around the property. Delilah often found her gaze drawn to him as he chopped wood or mended fences, his movements efficient and powerful. Sometimes he would look up, as if sensing her attention, and their eyes would meet across the yard. Each time, that connection seemed to strengthen. On the 4th day, the sheriff from Clearwater arrived, a stocky, no-nonsense man named Grover Walsh. He listened to Delilah's story in the privacy of Thomas's study, his expression giving nothing away. Benjamin Colt has no legal authority to pursue you, he finally said. The case was dismissed, and even if it hadn't been, he's not the law. He's a private citizen taking justice into his own hands, which is against the law itself. Hope sparked in Delilah's chest. So you can stop him, Sheriff Walsh sighed. It's not that simple. My jurisdiction only covers Clearwater County. I can send telegrams to alert other lawmen, but Colt has money and connections. And frankly, madam, while I believe your account, many will still see you as a woman who killed her husband. The hope withered as quickly as it had bloomed. So I just keep running forever. I didn't say that. The sheriff leaned forward. What you need is leverage, something that would make it more troublesome for Colt to pursue you than to leave you be. What kind of leverage? Asher asked from where he stood by the door. Information, usually. Men like Colt don't get wealthy without cutting corners. Sheriff Walsh stood, settling his hat back on his head. I'll do some digging, ask some questions in the right places. In the meantime, stay here where it's safe. Thomas runs a good operation, and his men know how to handle trouble. After he left, Asher found Delilah sitting alone on the porch, staring out at the distant mountains. The sheriff's a good man, he said, taking the chair beside her. If anyone can find something on Colt, it's him. And if he can't, she turned to face him. I can't stay here indefinitely, putting Thomas and Sarah at risk. We'll figure something out, Asher promised. Together. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Delilah searched his face, finding only sincerity and something deeper that made her breath catch. Why are you doing this, Asher? Really? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. Because from the moment I saw you behind that overturned wagon, something in me recognized something in you. We're both running from ghosts, Delilah. Both trying to atone for things we can't change. But maybe, he hesitated, maybe we don't have to do it alone anymore. His hand reached for hers, tentative in a way that seemed at odds with his usual confidence. Delilah interlaced her fingers with his, marveling at how natural it felt. I've been alone for so long, she whispered. I'm not sure I remember how to be anything else. We can learn together, he suggested, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching riders. Asher was on his feet instantly, hand going to his gun as Thomas emerged from the house, rifle ready. They relaxed slightly when they recognized Sheriff Walsh returning with 2 deputies. The sheriff's expression was grim as he dismounted. Colt's men hit a homestead about 10 miles east of here last night, looking for you, Miss Evans. Family wasn't harmed, but they were frightened bad. Cold dread washed over Delilah. This has to end, she said firmly. I can't have innocent people terrorized because of me. That's why I came back, Walsh said. I've got a plan, but it's risky. Inside, gathered around the kitchen table, the sheriff laid out his proposal. We let word leak that Miss Evans is planning to travel to Denver to meet her sister. Colt's men will set up an ambush along the most direct route. You want to use Delilah as bait. Asher's voice was dangerously quiet. Not exactly. We send a decoy stage, manned by my deputies. When Colt's men attack, we arrest them for attempted murder. With their testimony, we can go after Colt himself. And where is Delilah during all this? Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. Safe here at the ranch, Walsh assured them. The whole point is to draw Colt's attention away. Thomas frowned. It could work, but it's dangerous for your men. They understand the risks, and frankly, we need to stop Colt before someone gets killed. He's operating like he's above the law. I don't like it, Asher stated flatly. Neither do I, the sheriff admitted. But I'm open to better ideas. Silence fell as they all considered the situation. Finally, Delilah spoke. What if we gave Colt what he really wants? All eyes turned to her. Asher's expression darkened. Absolutely not. Hear me out, she insisted. "Colt doesn't just want me dead for revenge. He wants my silence. After James died, I found documents in his study evidence that he and Benjamin were involved in counterfeiting. I didn't understand their significance at the time, but later, when Benjamin was so determined to see me convicted." "You think he fears you'll expose him?" Thomas asked. Delilah nodded. "I told my sister where I hid the papers. If something happened to me, she was to take them to the federal authorities." The sheriff whistled low. "Counterfeiting is a federal offense. 20 years hard labor at least." "So we offer him a deal," Delilah continued. "I turn over the documents and sign a statement saying I have no further evidence or knowledge of his activities. In exchange, he leaves me alone permanently." "He could just kill you once he has the documents," Asher objected. "Not if we meet on neutral ground with witnesses," Sheriff Walsh mused, warming to the idea. "The territorial governor owes me a favor. If we conducted the exchange at his office in Cheyenne with federal marshals present." "It could work," Thomas admitted. "No," Asher said firmly. "It's too dangerous." Delilah met his concerned gaze steadily. "This has to end, Asher. I can't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." "Then we find another way." "This is the way," she said gently. "The documents are my only leverage." The argument continued well into the evening, with Asher adamantly opposed and the others gradually coming to see the merits of Delilah's plan. Finally, Sheriff Walsh departed to send telegrams to the governor and to request federal marshal support. That night, Delilah found Asher sitting alone on the porch, staring into the darkness. "You're still angry," she observed, sitting beside him. "Not angry, scared." He turned to her, his usual composure stripped away to reveal raw fear. "I can't lose you, Delilah, not when I've just found you." Her heart swelled at the naked emotion in his voice. "You won't lose me. I'm through running. You don't know what men like Colt are capable of." "Actually, I do." She took his hand. "I lived with James for 3 years. I saw firsthand the depths to which such men can sink. But I also survived, Asher. I'm stronger than I look." He closed his eyes briefly. "I know you are. It's one of the things I admire most about you." When he looked at her again, the vulnerability in his gaze took her breath away. "One of the many things." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and over far too soon. Delilah found herself following his retreat, seeking his mouth again. The second kiss was deeper, an answer to the question they'd both been asking since that first day. When they finally broke apart, Asher rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we face it together." Delilah nodded, her heart too full for words. 3 days later, preparations were complete. Sheriff Walsh returned with news that the governor had agreed to host the meeting and that Benjamin Colt, facing the threat of federal investigation, had agreed to the terms. The night before they were to depart for Cheyenne, Delilah sat at the small desk in her room, penning a letter to her sister. There was a soft knock at her door. "Come in," she called, expecting Sarah with fresh linens. Instead, Asher entered, his expression serious. He carried a small wooden box which he placed on the desk beside her letter. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a delicate silver chain with a simple heart-shaped pendant. "It was my mother's," Asher explained. "Rebecca kept it after she died. She gave it to me before she passed, said I should give it to someone special." Delilah's fingers trembled as she lifted the necklace. "Asher, I can't accept this." "You can." He took it from her and moved behind her chair. "May I?" She nodded, lifting her hair as he fastened the chain around her neck. The pendant nestled in the hollow of her throat, cool against her skin. "There," he said softly. His hands rested lightly on her shoulders. Now you carry a piece of my past with you just as I carry yours." Delilah rose and turned to face him, touched beyond words by the gesture. "Thank you." His arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "Promise me you'll be careful tomorrow." "I promise." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "This will be over soon, and then—" "And then," he prompted when she trailed off. Delilah looked up at him. "And then we start again, together." His kiss was her answer, tender yet passionate, filled with promise and possibility. The journey to Cheyenne took 2 days. Sheriff Walsh rode ahead with his deputies, while Thomas and 2 of his most trusted hands accompanied Delilah and Asher. Sarah had insisted on preparing enough food to feed an army, packing it carefully in saddlebags with stern instructions that they all eat properly. Cheyenne was larger and more bustling than Delilah had expected, with brick buildings lining the main street and a sense of permanence that the smaller frontier towns lacked. The territorial governor's office was housed in an imposing structure near the center of town, its polished brass fixtures and gleaming windows speaking of authority and stability. They were met at the entrance by a stern-faced federal marshal who escorted them inside. The governor, a portly, mustachioed man with shrewd eyes, greeted them in his wood-paneled office. "Miss Evans," he said, taking her hand briefly, "Sheriff Walsh has explained your unusual situation. I must say, I've been concerned about Mr. Colt's business dealings for some time. If your documents prove as illuminating as suggested, you'll be doing the territory a service." "I just want my freedom, sir," Delilah replied honestly, "and you shall have it." The governor turned to Asher. "Mr. Harrington, I understand you're Miss Evans's. Protect her." Asher's hand found Delilah's. "I'm whatever she needs me to be, Governor." A hint of a smile touched the older man's lips. "Indeed. Well, Mr. Colt will arrive shortly. I suggest we all take our positions." The plan was simple. Delilah would meet with Colt in the governor's office, with the governor himself and a stenographer present to record the agreement. Asher, Thomas, and Sheriff Walsh would wait in an adjoining room, ready to intervene if necessary. The federal marshals would be stationed throughout the building. When Benjamin Colt arrived, Delilah felt a chill run down her spine. He looked much as she remembered, tall and imposing, with cold gray eyes and a precisely trimmed beard. His expensive suit spoke of continued prosperity, but new lines around his mouth suggested the past 3 years hadn't been entirely kind to him either. His eyes narrowed when he saw her. "Miss Blackwell, or is it Evans now, Mr. Colt?" Delilah was proud that her voice remained steady. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Let's dispense with pleasantries," he said coldly. "You have something that belongs to me. I want it back." "The documents never belonged to you," Delilah corrected. "They belonged to James, and as his widow they passed to me." Colt's jaw tightened. "After you murdered him." "Gentlemen, Miss Evans," the governor intervened smoothly, "let us focus on the matter at hand. I believe we have an agreement to finalize." The next hour was tense but productive. The terms were straightforward. Delilah would surrender all documents related to Colt's business dealings and sign a statement affirming she had no further evidence or knowledge of illegal activities. In exchange, Colt would cease all efforts to find or harm her and would sign a statement acknowledging that she had acted in self-defense on the night of James's death. As the stenographer prepared the final documents for signature, Colt leaned forward, his voice pitched low for Delilah's ears only. "You think this ends it? A piece of paper?" Delilah met his gaze unflinchingly. "The documents I'm surrendering are copies, Mr. Colt. The originals are in a safe deposit box in Denver, with instructions for their release to federal authorities should anything happen to me." It was a bluff. The originals were exactly what she was surrendering, but one she delivered with absolute conviction. Doubt flickered in Colt's eyes. Before he could respond, the governor called for their signatures. "Remember," Delilah added softly as she took the pen, "I've already survived one man who thought he owned me. I won't hesitate to defend myself against another." Something in her tone, or perhaps the steady certainty in her eyes, gave Colt pause. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded curtly and signed his name with a flourish. Just like that, it was done. 3 years of running, of looking over her shoulder, of fearing every knock at the door, ended with a few strokes of a pen. Outside the governor's office, Asher was waiting. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he never intended to let go. "It's over," she whispered against his chest. "I'm free." The journey back to Redemption Ranch was filled with a lightness Delilah hadn't felt in years. Each mile that passed seemed to lift another weight from her shoulders. They traveled at a more leisurely pace, stopping to make proper camp each night rather than pushing on until dusk as they had on the journey to Cheyenne. On their final night before reaching the ranch, as they sat around the campfire after Thomas and the hands had retired to their bedrolls, Asher took Delilah's hand. "I've been thinking about what comes next," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Oh." Her heart quickened at his serious tone. "Now that you're truly free, you could go anywhere, do anything. I wouldn't want to hold you back." Delilah studied his face in the firelight, reading the uncertainty beneath his words. "Are you trying to give me an honorable way to leave, Asher Harrington?" A rueful smile touched his lips. "I'm trying to make sure you know all your options. The world is open to you now. And if my chosen option is to stay with you," hope flared in his eyes, "then I'd be the happiest man in Wyoming territory." He shifted to face her fully. "Delilah Evans, I know we've known each other only a short time, but in that time you've shown me more courage, more strength, and more heart than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. I love you, plainly and simply. And if you'll have me, I want to build a life with you." Tears pricked at Delilah's eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you, Mr. Harrington?" "I am," he confirmed, producing a simple gold band from his pocket. "I bought this in Cheyenne while you were meeting with the governor. Too soon, probably, but I couldn't help myself." Delilah looked at the ring, then back at Asher's hopeful face. "People will talk. They'll say you're making a mistake marrying a woman with my past. They'll say I'm too damaged." Asher's expression softened. "Let them talk. We'll be broken together, and that's okay. Always." He squeezed her hand. "Besides, I'm not exactly unblemished myself. Those 17 men haunt me still. Perhaps together we can find a way to make peace with our ghosts." Delilah's heart swelled with emotion. Never had she expected to find such acceptance, such understanding. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ring slipped onto her finger as if it had been made for her. Asher's kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of all that lay ahead. When they returned to Redemption Ranch the next day, Sarah took one look at them riding side by side, at the ring on Delilah's finger and the joy in Asher's eyes, and burst into tears of happiness. "I knew it," she declared, embracing them both. "I knew the moment I saw you together." Thomas was more reserved but no less pleased. "About time Ash found someone to keep him in line," he said gruffly, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "Welcome to the family, Miss Evans." "Soon to be Mrs. Harrington," Asher corrected with undisguised pride. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Clearwater, with Thomas and Sarah standing as witnesses. Sheriff Walsh attended, as did the ranch hands who had come to consider Delilah one of their own. To her surprise and joy, Clara arrived from Denver the day before the ceremony, having received Delilah's letter about her freedom from Benjamin Colt. "I've missed you so much," her sister said through happy tears as they embraced. "When your letter came, I could scarcely believe it." "It still feels like a dream sometimes," Delilah admitted. "To be free, to be loved." Clara studied her thoughtfully. "You're different, stronger. I've had to be." "No, it's more than that," Clara smiled. "You found peace in him." She nodded toward Asher, who was deep in conversation with Thomas across the room. "He looks at you like you hung the moon and stars." Heat rose to Delilah's cheeks. "He's a good man, the best I've ever known." "Then I approve wholeheartedly," Clara declared. "Though I'll still need to have a stern conversation with him about his intentions." "Clara," Delilah laughed. But her sister was already making her way toward Asher, determination in every step. Whatever Clara said to him that night, Asher appeared both amused and properly chastened afterward. "Your sister is a formidable woman," he commented as they walked back to the ranch under a canopy of stars. "She's protective." "As she should be." He wrapped an arm around her waist. "I promised her I'd spend the rest of my life making you happy." "A weighty responsibility," Delilah teased. "One I take very seriously." He stopped, turning to face her. In the moonlight, his features were cast in silver and shadow, achingly beautiful to her. "I meant what I said that day at the ranch, Delilah. We're both broken in our own ways, but together we're stronger. Together we can heal." "Together," she agreed, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "Always." The wedding itself was simple but perfect. Delilah wore a cream-colored dress that Sarah and May Lynn had worked tirelessly to create, with tiny pearl buttons and delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Clara had brought their mother's veil from Denver, something Delilah had thought lost forever, when she fled St. Louis. Asher, in a new black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame, looked at her with such naked adoration as she walked down the aisle that Delilah nearly forgot to breathe. The minister spoke of hope and new beginnings, of God's mercy and the healing power of love. When it came time for their vows, Asher took Delilah's hands in his. "I, Asher James Harrington, take you, Delilah Marie Evans, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to cherish your strength, to honor your spirit, to walk beside you in good times and in hard times. I promise to remember always that we are strongest when we face life's challenges together. With this ring, I pledge my love, my loyalty, and my life to you." Tears blurred Delilah's vision as she spoke her own vows. "I, Delilah Marie Evans, take you, Asher James Harrington, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand with you, to trust in you, to build a life of joy and purpose with you. I promise to remember always that our scars are proof of our survival, not marks of our defeat. With this ring, I give you my heart, my trust, and my future. By the power vested in me," the minister concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Their first kiss as a married couple was sweet and reverent, a sacred seal on promises made. The celebration afterward at Redemption Ranch lasted well into the night, with food and music and dancing under lantern light. Asher proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding Delilah through waltzes and reels with confident ease. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, breathless from a particularly spirited turn. "My mother insisted all her children learn the social graces." A mischievous smile played at his lips. She'd be pleased to know her lessons weren't wasted. As the evening wound down, Thomas called for attention, raising his glass. "To Asher and Delilah," he said, his gruff voice unusually soft. "May you find in each other the healing you both deserve." "To healing," the guests echoed. Later, as they stood alone on the porch of the small cabin Thomas had given them as a wedding gift not far from the main house but private enough for newlyweds, Delilah looked up at her husband with wonder. "How did this happen?" she asked softly. "How did I go from running for my life to standing here with you?" Asher's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was luck. Or maybe," he murmured against her hair, "it was simply time for both of us to stop running and start living." Inside the cabin, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden light across the simple but comfortable furnishings. The bedroom door stood partially open, revealing fresh linens on a sturdy oak bed, Sarah's handiwork, no doubt. As Asher closed the front door behind them, a new shyness fell between them. For all the kisses and embraces they had shared, this moment represented a different intimacy altogether. "Nervous?" he asked gently, noting her hesitation. "A little," she admitted. "My experience with this aspect of marriage, it wasn't." Understanding dawned in his eyes. James wasn't a gentle man. She shook her head, unable to meet his gaze. Asher lifted her chin with a gentle finger. "Look at me, Delilah." When she did, he continued, "We have all the time in the world. Nothing happens tonight or any night that you don't want. You're in control here." The tenderness in his voice nearly undid her. "What if I don't know what I want? Then we discover it together." He brushed a stray curl from her face, "Step by step." And so they did, with patience and reverence, with whispered questions and gentle guidance, with laughter when things went awkwardly and sighs when they went right. In Asher's arms, Delilah discovered that physical love could be beautiful, tender, and healing. That her body was not a battleground but a garden, capable of giving and receiving joy. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, she felt tears slide down her cheeks. "Did I hurt you?" Asher asked, immediately concerned. "No," she smiled through her tears. "Just the opposite. I never knew it could be like that." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the trail of tears on her cheeks. "It will always be like that between us. I promise." In the weeks that followed, they settled into the rhythms of married life at Redemption Ranch. Asher worked alongside Thomas and the hands, while Delilah divided her time between helping Sarah with household management and establishing their own home. She discovered a talent for bookkeeping, gradually taking over the ranch accounts to everyone's relief. Clara stayed for a month before returning to Denver, extracting promises from both Asher and Delilah to visit within the year. Sheriff Walsh became a regular visitor, often bringing news from Cheyenne or Clearwater. In late autumn, he arrived with particularly significant information. "Benjamin Colt has been arrested," he announced over dinner. "Federal charges of counterfeiting and fraud. Those documents you turned over did the trick, Mrs. Harrington." Delilah absorbed the news with a strange sense of detachment. "Will they need me to testify?" "Don't think so. They've got enough evidence without dragging you into it." The sheriff hesitated. "There's more. James Blackwell's family has issued a formal apology through their lawyers. Seems they've had a change of heart since Colt's arrest, and subsequent investigation revealed his influence over the events following your husband's death." Asher's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "How do you feel about that?" Delilah considered the question carefully. "Vindicated, I suppose, but mostly I just feel free, like the last chain binding me to that life has been broken." That night, as they lay together in their bed, Delilah shared news of her own. "Dr. Miller confirmed it today," she said, guiding Asher's hand to rest on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby in the spring." The wonder that bloomed on his face was something she would treasure forever. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to describe it. He gathered her close, pressing his lips to her forehead. I never thought I'd have this: a wife, a child, a future worth fighting for. You've given me everything, Delilah. We've given it to each other, she corrected softly. Together. Together, he agreed. Always. Spring brought not only wildflowers to the plains surrounding Redemption Ranch, but also the birth of their son, whom they named Thomas James Harrington Thomas, for the man who had given them sanctuary when they needed it most. And James not for Delilah's first husband, but for Asher's middle name and his father before him. He's perfect, Asher whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with awe. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and your beautiful eyes. He has your chin, Delilah observed, exhausted but radiant. Poor child. Asher laughed, the sound bright and unrestrained. He's lucky to have your heart, though. And your courage. Sarah, who had assisted the doctor during the birth, smiled at the new family from the doorway. I'll leave you 3 alone. Rest, dear. You've done magnificent work today. When she was gone, Asher carefully placed their son in the cradle beside the bed and sat next to Delilah, taking her hand in his. I've been thinking, he said, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his voice. A dangerous pastime, she teased. He smiled. Thomas has offered to sell us a portion of his land, the east section, with the creek running through it. Says he's getting too old to manage so much property. And you want to accept? I want us to build our own ranch, he said, his eyes alight with purpose. Something that's ours, that we create together. A legacy for little Thomas and any brothers or sisters that might come along. The idea took root immediately in Delilah's heart. Our own place, she mused. I like the sound of that. I thought we might call it Second Chance Ranch, Asher continued, because that's what we've given each other. Tears pricked at Delilah's eyes, happy tears, the only kind she seemed to shed these days. It's perfect. By the time Thomas James was taking his first steps, Second Chance Ranch was a thriving operation. Asher had a knack for horse breeding, it turned out, and Delilah's head for figures ensured they managed their resources wisely. They built a home of their own, larger than their first cabin but still modest, with a wide porch where they could watch the sunset together, and a nursery that Asher insisted be large enough for at least 3 more little ones. Their second child, a daughter they named Rebecca Sarah, arrived the following year, a bright-eyed, strong-willed girl who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she drew her first breath. Life wasn't without its challenges. There were droughts and harsh winters, disputes with neighboring ranchers, and the occasional encounter with those who had heard rumors of Delilah's past and were quick to judge. But through it all, they faced each obstacle together, drawing strength from their love and from the family they were building. 5 years to the day after they first met, Asher surprised Delilah with a small party at Second Chance Ranch. Thomas and Sarah were there, of course, as well as Clara and her husband from Denver, Sheriff Walsh, and the loyal hands who had been with them since the beginning. After dinner, as the children played under the watchful eyes of May Lynn, who had come with them when they established their own ranch, Asher led Delilah to the porch swing that had been his gift to her on their first anniversary. 5 years, he marveled, taking her hand in his. Sometimes I still can't believe how lucky I am. Not luck, Delilah corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. Choice. We chose each other despite all the reasons the world gave us not to. Asher's arm tightened around her shoulders. Best choice I ever made. In the distance, the sun was setting over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Their children's laughter floated on the evening breeze, a sweet counterpoint to the deeper rhythm of their shared heartbeat. Do you ever wonder, Asher asked softly, what would have happened if I hadn't been in Laramie that day? If I hadn't seen you behind that wagon? Delilah considered the question. Sometimes, But then I think perhaps we would have found each other anyway somehow. Some connections are meant to be. Fate, or just the simple truth that broken pieces fit together in ways that whole ones never can. She turned to face him, tracing the beloved lines of his face with gentle fingers. They said I was too damaged to ever be truly loved. They were wrong, Asher said simply. They were, she agreed, because you loved me not despite my damage but with it. You taught me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. And you taught me that redemption isn't something you find, it's something you build, day by day, choice by choice. In the gathering dusk, their lips met in a kiss that held all the passion of new love and all the comfort of years, spent walking side by side through life's joys and sorrows. I love you, Asher Harrington, Delilah whispered against his mouth, broken parts and all. And I love you, Delilah Harrington, he returned, broken together. And that's okay, she finished their familiar refrain. Always, he promised. Inside the house, little Thomas called for his parents, his sister's wail joining the summons a moment later. With a laugh, they rose together, hand in hand, to tend to their children the future they were building from the ashes of their pasts. Later that night, with the children finally asleep and the house quiet around them, Delilah stood by their bedroom window, gazing out at the star-filled sky. Asher came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we've come," she replied. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up and find myself running again, looking over my shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up with me. And instead—" She turned in his arms, resting her palms against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. "Instead, I find you, our children, this home we've built together. No regrets." He asked, the question holding echoes of 1,000 similar exchanges over the years, a reassurance they both still sometimes needed. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Every step of the journey, even the painful ones, brought me here, to you, to us." Asher's kiss was tender, a reaffirmation of all they had promised each other on that day in the small church in Clearwater. When he drew back, his eyes held the same wonder they had the first time he told her he loved her. "Together," he whispered. "Always," she replied, the word both a promise and a prayer of thanksgiving for second chances, for healing, and for the profound truth that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are created from broken pieces carefully mended with love.